John Workington here from Michael's Camera. I'm joined today by...
Elliot Ramsey.
Well, I should have said with, but anyway, but he's here. We have the brand new Nikon D780, and we've got it right here in our hands. So we're quite lucky to get it because it has just been announced, what, 4 or 5 days ago?
5 days ago, I think, yeah.
So this is a pretty exciting camera for the Nikon shooters out there who are still interested in the conventional optical viewfinder digital SLR experience. So I'm just going to pass this over to Elliot here, being that he is the Nikon shooter amongst us. I do use them now and then, but I must admit my experience is not anywhere near as high as Elliot's. So that's why we brought him on board here to share some pearls of wisdom.
Cool. Well, I currently shoot the D850 and the Z6, and the reason I do shoot those two cameras is because this camera didn't exist. So I was really thrilled when this camera was announced just last week, and we sort of like got our hands on it, had a good look. It really is a good hybrid camera that actually enables all those Nikon shooters that have been looking for something to be able to capture both stills and video, the perfect solution in the meantime.
So unless you've been living under a rock, we know that the industry's gone to a mirrorless system. All the players are in the mirrorless game. Nikon's no exception with their new Z series. So they've broken their Z series into two cameras right now. They're both full frame. They are the Z6, which is a 24 megapixel or 24.5 megapixel, kind of a, think of it as a video centric or more of an entry level in the Z series. And then there's a higher resolution, 47 megapixel, the Z7.
46.7, yeah.
But back to digital SLRs, the new 780 is basically got the DNA of the Z6 from mirrorless into the more conventional digital SLR form factor. And with that in mind, because the predecessor of this camera, which was the D750, which now goes back almost 6 years, that was a huge hit. And from what we understand, I think that was Nikon's best seller in full frame digital SLRs. So there's been a huge amount of anticipation for this camera, and we think it hits the sweet spot for it. So let's dive into the specifications a little bit. The main spec is, it is a new sensor.
New sensor, just derived pretty much straight from the Z6. You've thrown me under a bus.
Yeah. Don't worry, we've got talking points right here anyway, so even if we forget, we can always read them. But yeah, so they've got the latest in a backside illuminated sensor. So in layman's terms, basically it means that these sensors can capture a bit more light than the earlier sensors. So that means we're probably going to be seeing another stop of greater sensitivity. So at the top end of the ISO, a little bit less noise.
Yep.
And other than that, I mean, that's probably not the real, the deal, the key feature here. But that's a nice little bit of icing on top.
Yeah.
What makes it really interesting is when you kick into video, because that's where, well, at 6 years ago, there really wasn't too much in video in the Nikon line. And of course, a lot of the competing companies have had much better autofocus systems for video. So now Nikon is fighting.
Yeah.
They've got the DNA from it's basically a phase detect autofocus system, which is on sensor in the Z series cameras, but they didn't have anything of the sort in the digital SLR. So now they've got it.
It's what I was wishing for in the D850, but never had.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of Nikon shooters that had to get a second system from another manufacturer if they wanted to shoot video, because otherwise you just didn't have an autofocus engine at all.
Yeah.
So now they've got that. So some of the other key features is we've seen a little bump in the stills frame rate when you're in digital SLR mode. So it was from 6.5 to 7 frames per second. However, there are some ways to get it to go upwards of 12 frames per second in live view stills mode. The other big feature here is we've got full sensor width 4K video.
Yeah.
And they're also crop mode, so you've got an awful lot of flexibility with the video. You've got, it's not like you kick into 4K and you lose autofocus. It's got autofocus throughout the whole range. You've got your 24 frame per second, 25, 30. When you kick down to full HD, you've got up to 120 frame per second.
120 frames.
Yeah, so, and all those modes work in both the DX and the FX form factor, or framing. So basically full width or the 1.5 crop factor.
Let's jump back to the autofocus again for a moment. So another thing that I think from my experience working with the D850 and then also using the Z system is you just don't realize how much extra room you've got in your viewfinder for room you've got on the sensor for focusing when you're using the on-sensor phase detection.
Yeah, right out to the edges, basically.
Right out to the edges.
Yeah.
So if you're doing more dynamic kind of shooting, say with a model, you can actually allow the model to creep right to the edge, and with eye detect now on the D780, you can actually capture that, and albeit though you're shooting in live view at the time. The flexibility that enables is just huge.
Yeah.
And the eye detect's actually pretty good, to be fair. I mean, it's lagging Sony probably, and there's a little bit of a shootout between Canon and Nikon, but it's pretty good. It's pretty up there.
They've had a year in the marketplace, maybe a little bit more with the Z series, and they've also shown they're pumping out firmware updates for these cameras. So I think there's going to be probably some new features showing up in probably the first 6 months of the camera system, because we've already seen the addition of raw video to external recorders with the Z6. Yes, so there's no guarantee that's going to come to the 780, but considering it's so close, I think there's a good chance we'll see it.
Yeah.
Now, what about compromises? The optical viewfinder experience is something that everybody knows and loves from how many years, decades of digital SLRs. And we do have an awful lot of the live view experience, but keep in mind when you kick into live view mode on these cameras, you will be working from the rear LCD. However, as we know from the smartphone revolution, there's a lot of people who've grown up always looking at LCD, so maybe that's not the world's biggest downside. From the D750, which we've got one right here. Which one is that now? That is there.
I think we're floating around here. No, it's the 850.
That's the 850.
That's the 850. The 750's got to be right next door.
So there's the 750. So
there we go.
now, if you remember that the 750, that had a pop-up flash. We've now lost that. So that's probably not the end of the world, considering there's so much development in the 6 years from when this camera came out in off-camera flash. Tons of different brands.
So many price-effective options.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? Onboard flash was never that good anyway. You don't really want that. So we've
inherited a new display on the back as well before we kick into.
Oh yes. So we've got basically
the D850's display has been pulled over onto the D780. It's a really good display. Despite any of the shortcomings it might have had in video, it certainly was a great one when you're working in the studio, anything like that where you want to use live view for critical focus. It's just a really good display, and it's certainly a better display than we're seeing on, say, Sony cameras at this time.
And of course, it's got a touch screen user interface and a very nice implementation. So if you're moving up from the D750, I mean, it's a brand new life here with the displays in this. Now, when we're talking about having some of the DNA from the Z series cameras into the live view area of the new 780, it's got also a little bit of the DNA from the D5, which is this baby right here, the big sports camera. The digital SLR focusing system, keep in mind, of course, because this is a bit of a hybrid camera. There's two completely different worlds. There's when you're using the mirror and the optical viewfinder, you are not focusing on sensor. You've got a completely different focusing engine, and they've grabbed a fair bit of the smarts in the tracking department from the D5. So I think we're going to see a real rock solid performer here when it comes to working as a stills camera.
Yeah, I had a good play with it in the last couple of days, and of course we haven't got the same 154 points, I think it is, on the D850 and the
down
D5.
To 51 points.
So I think it's continued with the same amount of points, but the algorithm and also the new processor in this camera makes it really, really snappy. It was actually, it's kind of hard to quantify these things, but it just felt almost alive in my hands.
Yes,
and great feedback.
It's got the latest processor in here, so it's a heck of a kick in the pants for anybody who was shooting on D750s. Now, we haven't changed the resolution, so why? Well, that's real simple. 24 megapixels, or in this case 24.5, that's kind of the Goldilocks spot in cameras. It's enough resolution to go big, but not so much that you have to change your shooting style, get a faster computer, slow the whole camera down because the files are so huge, get disappointed in your lenses because they can't resolve 100 megapixels or whatever. 24 megapixels is just a happy spot, so there was no need for them to change that. You add one of these things to your kit and keep your 750 as your B camera, and other than some of the usability issues, I mean, there's going to be no complaints with mixing and matching files from those two cameras. It's going to be a very nice wedding shooter's workflow, an event shooter, you know, all these sorts of things. And now, of course, you've got the latest Wi-Fi implementation with the always-on Bluetooth here, so you can then talk to your cell phone or your tablet, get some of the quick pictures off, get them sent out to social media. So for a working event and wedding type photographer, it's going to be a brilliant addition to their kit. And of course, it's the F mount system for Nikon, and you're probably sitting on lenses. If you're invested in F mount, this is the camera for you.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So there's also a nice little weight shaving in this camera as well, so it's nice and light to carry.
No, that actually, sorry, I did interrupt you. That brings up an interesting point. So yes, a little bit of a weight saving, but still good in the hand. I mean, this is a full-size, full-frame digital SLR. This is not some small little camera for dainty little hands. This is a tool, you know. It feels good in the hand.
It feels like a professional tool.
Exactly. It's you'll be able to move from any of the Nikon digital SLRs into this camera, and you're going to feel right at home with it. And you know, sometimes you don't need to change something that's perfect. The ergonomics have been well established within the Nikon line for what, the better part of 20 years. It doesn't break any new ground there because it didn't need to. It's the old familiar, you know, and that's why it looks like a camera. You know, it's not going to stick out in the crowd. Nobody's going to know you got the brand new thing because it's the tool you know and love.
It just feels so it feels comfortable is the best way of putting it.
One
other thing we should touch on is the fact that the engineers managed to, with the new processor and the new electronics in this camera, you get a third more snaps from it basically. I think you're up into the low 2000s, whereas I think on the previous camera around about 1800.
Oh yes, of course. Digital SLRs, when they're in that mode, battery life is spectacular. There's been a lot of complaints in the mirrorless world as when digital SLR shooters have moved over to mirrorless because the battery's running a lot of different subsystems in there and they don't get the greatest life. And of course, a lot of the mirrorless cameras, they decided to miniaturize them a little bit, which then caused more sacrificing in thermal dissipation. So they were overheating in video. And of course, batteries got smaller because form factors got smaller. So yeah, I mean, what are they quoting here for they're saying 2,260 shots per charge with the viewfinder. And of course, those numbers are always conservative. So I think it's probably going to be 4,000 or something. You know, it's for a stills photographer, this is going to, you know, it's going to deliver probably a full day shooting on one battery. Now that brings up another point. There is a little bit of bad news here. Nikon has not announced a grip yet, but they have dual battery grips coming at some point for the Z series. So I think there probably will be a few months out. There's certainly a possibility, but we have noticed there are no contacts for control. So if they do release a grip, it won't be a control grip, it'll be a battery grip. But in the interest of weight saving, and it feels pretty good in the hand anyway.
It does.
It's not a camera like the Sonys that were crying for a grip. This is a completely usable tool without a grip.
Even compared to the Zs, it's just got the right amount of heft to it.
Now, there's no doubt about it, you're going to be considering this and potentially a Z. So what else are the major differences here between these two cameras?
I think it's actually that comfort level is really the major difference between the two cameras. I mean, the Z system is fabulous, and don't get me wrong, I'm a complete advocate for it. But in the system, you've got lineage really in the system, and so anyone who has been waiting for this marriage, if you will, of these two technologies to come together, it's delivered on that, and it's delivered on in a package that's really pretty robust.
Now we should bring up the in-body stabilization question. That's one feature that did not carry over from the Z to this camera, but that's not a problem because of course within the F mount line there is a very wide range of stabilized lenses.
This is true.
Now, it might come in the future, we don't really know. But of course, Nikon did in their mirrorless add in-body stabilization, which some of the competitors hadn't done yet. So we don't know about that. But that's certainly nothing that's preventing it from being a great camera.
That's true.
Everybody was looking forward to it maybe, but maybe we'll see that in an upcoming refresh of the, say, the 850 or something.
850 or something.
But what's important here is that Nikon is not abandoning the digital SLR.
This is true.
So that's good news because there was a lot of fear that, you know, that was all gone. And there's no shortage of Nikon shooters out there that are sitting on what might be now their spare cameras, but great, selections of lenses. And of course, lenses going back, what, 4 decades are mountable
decades.
on these things?
Well, this thing, in the store here, we had so many people come in who were just really kind of uncomfortable about where things were at. And so this is basically the camera that they had been hoping for to come out, because they weren't quite sure about the jump to the new Zs and the new mount system, which, you know, it's going to be fantastic into the future, but they're heavily invested, and they have a shooting style that suits them.
Now, I just want to go over my list so I don't miss out on a few of the things. For the D750 shooters, who will be the obvious ones who'll be upgrading to this, or and, you know, could be a good second camera for a D850
Great second
shooter.
camera for a D850.
We've got longer shutter speeds are available without external controls, so we can go up to a 900-second exposure, and we can also have gone a little faster. We go up to 1/8,000th of a second,
yep.
so that's good. We've got 10-bit video over HDMI. Oh, of course, the Z cameras didn't have dual slots. Now we've got dual card slots
Dual card
here.
slots.
And they're SD.
Yeah.
What you know and love, what you already have probably dozens of.
Yeah, no XQD shortages.
Yes, exactly. You'll be able to plug it into the reader on your computer.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so, and that's nice. We just tested it out, working fine. You've got all the classics, record to both cards, JPEG on one, RAW on the other, or overflow. Works exactly as you'd expect it.
Speaking of speed and bits and pieces, jumping back to the 1/8,000th of a second, of course, with all the new off-camera flash systems that are coming out, we can take advantage of hypersync or HS, and that 8,000th of a second will become critical at that point if you want
if you're
to
using
shoot
a
some
fast
action.
lens.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a classic style of flash photography, and if you dive into off-camera flash, this is an attractive one. This is underexposing daylight. And there's only a couple ways to do that. You've got to stop all the way down to f/22, you got to go to low ISO, or you got to go to high-speed shutter.
Yeah.
And having that 8,000th of a second is really nice. So that's a great feature to point out here. Oh, we've got interval shooting with this camera, and you get to keep your RAW files as well. So you can do some time lapse with some heavy post-production. So that's quite a nice feature. What else we got to say here?
Oh, focus stacking, actually.
Oh, yeah?
The camera has inbuilt focus stacking now as well, like the D850.
And a little carrier from the D850, we've got that negative shooting mode with that little adapter that Nikon sells. I don't know what the number is, but it's the one that goes on the 45 millimeter micro lens. I think that's what it is. Yes, anyway. So these cameras are great for digitizing slides. It's all built in.
Speaking of some of that, we've also got the adjusted focus tuning adjustability for both the wide and the tele end on this camera.
Yeah, so that's good. Let's take a look at our sort of a roundup here. So basically, in the exciting column of this, we've got the backside illuminated sensors. That's the latest technology. We're sticking at the old standby, about 24 megapixels, because that's great. So it's sitting pretty for that. We've got a 7 frame per second with up to 12. So we've got we've got some burst rates covered there. We've got a video autofocus system, which is just exciting. Everybody wants that, so that's great. As a matter of fact, obviously we're not shooting with the D780 right now because we've only got one. It hasn't been released. But for all intents and purposes, we're shooting this video right now with the autofocus system from here because we've got 2 of the Z6s hooked up.
The beauty of this, of course, is once you perhaps put it on a Ronin gimbal or something rather like that, you've got a very dynamic shooting environment, and that will track with you.
We've got a wide range of video settings and photo settings on this, of course, but they're remembered when you switch modes. So if you're shooting at an 8,000th of a second and you kick over to video and you had your video set for a 30th of a second and a completely different aperture, it remembers it. About time, everybody's going to love that feature. I wish my Canons had that.
True.
What else we got here? Obviously great battery life. Oh, it's the EL15 type battery, which has been used for basically the last decade. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that. And of course, if you're going to put one of these together with the Z system, same battery again.
Same battery, and in-camera charging now as well.
That's right, in-camera over USB-C. So is this the first body now we've got with USB-C?
No, not the first of the SLR bodies.
SLRs, yes, but the Z series has got it as well. So that's good to know. And of course, it's the the optical viewfinder experience that you know and love. There's no doubt about it. There is a range of market in the marketplace that is really keen on this. So basically, in a roundup, who's this camera for, Elliot?
I think this camera is for everyone who's been waiting for the best of both worlds to arrive. And of the Nikon shooters out there, there's a huge amount of you. There's enthusiasts. There's obviously people who want to do some action photography, wedding photography, things like that, where they want to be able to drop into video and just get a little bit of that, and then straight back into stills, but do it in a really robust system that works.
Yeah, and video with no compromises. I mean, there's been so many cameras where the video has been so crippled. It's a great video implementation. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about it. I think we're going to see them in store in the March time frame, and we're taking pre-orders now at Michael's. If you happen to be sitting on some other kit and you'd like to do a little trade-in, of course, Michael's happy to see you.
Yeah.
You might even have an old D700. You know, that was a great camera in its day. And you might be shooting with that as a 2-camera kit with a 750 and a 700. Well, trade in the 700 and add a 780 to your kit.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just going to slot right in perfectly.
This is a camera you won't regret buying.
No, no. It's got this is your next 5 years worth of shooting in this one. Nikon is still supporting it. They're all in on both mirrorless and digital SLRs.
Yeah.
So I think it's really exciting times for the Nikon shooters. We look forward to serving you here at Michael's Camera, and we've got a wide range of everything in Nikon. Yeah, we've got it all. And of course, we've got lots of used gear. We've got lots of very interesting F-mount glass for you if you want to get in. And come in and talk to us. We're looking forward to seeing you and getting you suited up with a new D780.
Yeah, we'll get you out.
Yeah. Take care. We'll see you on the next video.
Cool. See you.
Bloody good. That's not bad.
No, you're great.